Thank you so much indeed to just having been part of the breakfast show indeed. My name is Vernon Stiffy. It is a pleasure still to come through, of course, your stereos at the hour of 7 as we are just getting into behind the markets with Twale. Good morning, and what is your morning like?
Mine is hectic. Actually, I joined what I call the 5 a.m. club. It's a wonderful book, by the way. You might want to read that. And it says you have to do three things in the morning before 6 p.m., 6 a.m. Between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., you must exercise. It said you must move first, then you must reflect, write your goals and everything, and study something. So that by 6 a.m., when you're up and everyone is just getting up and starting their day, you're already mentally in motion. So I actually set my alarm at 4:30 in the morning for me to actually get up first. I put in scripture time before that. So it's read Bible, work out, read some, just go through my goals for the day. I write them down the day before, then I have to go to them for the day, what I need to do. And then I try and learn something, whether it's read a book, read a skill set, something I just try and do to keep my mind fresh. So that by the time I'm getting started at 6, my life is kicking off. Because I want to make sure that before the sun comes up and you're all kind of yawning and getting out, I'm busy. That's the point of my day.
So how's it? This is only 7:50 and your day is hectic already.
No, but by the time 7:50 kicks in, I've been awake for 3 hours. You know, I said I've been awake and kicking for 3 hours, and I've got multiple things. Because the thing, Vernon, that most people don't get is the morning is your time. Okay, by the time 8 a.m. hits in the morning, you are now operating on your workplace's time. You're operating on other people's time. The morning is your time. That's what you have to try and use that period for. So anyway, Vernon, I've already gone through data as well. So that's part of what I do in the morning. I also make sure I check on markets, how they're opening. And it's time for me to give my read to the people who are trying to figure out how to navigate bond auctions, investment activities, and how to make the best decisions for themselves. Because that is the purpose Money FM exists, by the way, to improve the financial decision-making of business people and entrepreneurs business people and investors. Let's say business people and entrepreneurs. Though according to Vusi Tembakwaya, being a business person is actually different from being an entrepreneur. A business person is a person who owns a business but cannot leave it. Because if they leave it for 90 days, then it'll fall apart. But an entrepreneur can go on vacation for 90 days, come back, and their business is still growing. That's the difference, by the way. Now, let's take a look at it. The Kwacha yesterday closed at 21.347 on the interbank rate, up 0.4%. It seems to be accelerating again. Dollars are up 17.96% year to date. So as an asset, they're good. As a thing to buy with, they're hurting. Okay, so the entrepreneur is getting beat on the back of their head. The person who has at least got 5% to 10% of their portfolio somewhere in USD or in USD-related assets. See, there's a reason, Vernon, I tell people, keep your money, keep 15% of your wealth portfolio in dollars, gold, and cryptocurrency, because all three of those things are denominated in dollars. Right. So you're always going to get the benefit of the dollar in them. And if they're all having a rally, or if you're having what we call a flight to safety, those ones get done as well. They also have a good time as well. So dollars are up 17.96% year to date. We're also seeing that that the rand moved up again by 0.82%. I'm very concerned right now, Vernon, about the value of the rand. That is inflation pressure waiting to come in, because everyone is looking at the dollar. Yes, the dollar directly affects, especially energy prices and things that we import from China, be it electronics. Okay, electronics and energy that we get from the Middle East, those things are mainly dollarized. Rand is most of the consumer goods that we import that come into our main grocery stores. They come in through rand. So we're going to get affected by this. What I've seen here, Vernon, is in the last month, the rand is up 9%. Okay, the dollar is up 7.76%, but the rand is up 9%. This is the worst performing month of the Kwacha of the last 3. It is the worst. And so there is a lot of inflation pressure probably coming in, not this month, but the next month. that we're going to start seeing reflected in the grocery prices, that we're getting electronics prices, but at least energy prices might still hold still. So the non-energy related inflation might start coming through problematically. We're out of the farming season, so fertilizer prices may not be such a big thing anymore. But healthcare costs, because we import medicine in dollars, that's an issue. Remember, we import 90% of our medicine. So all the medicine that you have on shelves, you need to realize that comes into this country through USD, mainly through India, but through many other countries as well. It comes in through USD. Your energy prices come through USD. Your electronics come in through USD. But your other things also come in through rands. So you want to be very careful about the costs that we're incurring on that perspective. On the currency side, the inflation pressure that is starting to pick up. The rand is up 10% year to date, so we probably will start to see inflation move specifically with the South African rand. I am seeing pressure probably building up there. Now, the other part I'm seeing, Vernon, is in terms of our bond market. Bonds did take a nosedive a couple of weeks back, but they're back up again. 9,800, sorry, 988.5. That's where the bond index is sitting. 5.7, 5.17%. So it's operating just a little bit below inflation. We are seeing that year-to-date bonds in US dollars are down about 10.86%, down 0.3%. So the US dollar effect is affecting. And while we're seeing interest rates, year-to-date interest rates on bonds are up 1.18%, meaning there's a secondary market bond sell-off, saying that there's more activity happening at auction. So whenever you're seeing interest rates climbing before, it is a signal that you're probably expecting higher interest rates just before we get into auction. On the other side of things, we have seen that Commonwealth Corporation stocks have been trading heavily. We saw 49 million shares traded the day before and 32 million shares traded yesterday at the price of 5 kwacha per share, maintaining that valuation of 8 billion kwacha. And I say it again, the billion with the B. That is the most valuable company on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. Second most valuable company is ZCCM with worth 6.1 billion, and the third most valuable company on the stock exchange is Zambia Sugar with 5.7 billion. Those three are making up close to half. Those are huge companies. That's how much of a Goliath Copperbelt Energy has become in terms of a juggernaut in the industry. Now, obviously, ZCCM is one of those stocks that is also grossly underpriced because it's an illiquid stock. And obviously, there's got to be ways to start fixing that because the majority of ZCCM shares are held by the government, by IDC, Ministry of Finance, and NAPSA. So if you can kind of unbundle that. One of the things I've been pushing for when it comes to how ZCCM is that we need to offload some of those shares to the Zambian people to, one, improve liquidity, because that stock should be about at least 3 times more. It should be priced 3 times more than it is right now, especially with the Kansanshi deal that they're currently working on. We're still reading through the full circular on it so that we can go through it and give a proper presentation to the people, because all the details have finally been released. But that is a good deal that's probably going to help cash flow through ZCCM. And I know the politics of it, people will start to make noise, but here's what I always say, Vernon, to as many people as possible. It's not my job to deal with the wokeness of politics. It's my job to help you, give you the best investment decisions that you can get possible. Now, what we're also seeing as well in the commodity markets, before we wind up on this market roundup, is that oil. Sorry, let me just roll back here. Copper is down 0.19%. Oil is down 0.74% in US dollars, while we also saw that gold was down 0.06%. So we are seeing shockwaves down as we're waiting for PMI data coming out of China. Simultaneously, we did see Bitcoin up 2.5%, Ethereum up 3.4%, and gold in Kwacha up 0.03%. And year to date, we're still seeing very strong runs on our cryptocurrencies, up 95.6%, 76.1% in terms of Ethereum, and gold is up 28.2%, with US dollars up 18%. Stock market is only up 5.8%, and the bond market is up 5.2%. And quickly, the main stories that have been operating in our market space. One is we're expecting oil prices to probably remain flat. I am reading part of my outlook for the oil prices just in general is that we've seen that the global oil price on average has traded lower than the dollar has risen. The dollar has risen 5.9% on average between the last month and this month, while oil prices are up 5.8%. Sorry, oil prices are down 5.8%, giving us the read that we are expecting this. But there is momentum going into dollars right now. Now, sorry, there is momentum going into oil prices right now as we speak, which is suggesting that on the other side of the month, we'll probably see oil prices picking up. Okay, so we may start to see it. However, with the pipelines being concluded and diesel prices probably coming in a little bit cheaper, that might structurally affect the market. So we're also going to be looking at how that's performing. So for the next 2 months, our reads may be a little bit wonky because we're seeing supply chain changes. Okay, supply chain changes. I think there's a little bit of an echo happening right now, but we're seeing supply chain changes happening right now, especially in the oil space. To our tech team, please just take note of that. Now, finally, in terms of the other side of it, Vernon, we'll be looking at the news that mainly came out, and we're currently looking at what data has come out and the fact that we're waiting on Chinese PMIs and certainty to look at how the Chinese industrial sector is performing. Banking fears are starting to ease, so that's why we're seeing dollars selling off. South Africa's power woes are actually creating more economic nightmare for their country, but we'll be looking at all other data sources coming in from the global economy on the other side of this. Vernon, we shall catch up.
All right, so we had actually set out, for a quick breather, the 60 at 60, of course, at 8, and just, pay a bit of some business.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So getting back to today's news, we are expecting some of the major news stories. Obviously, as we are prepping with our democracy summit, our president did say a major statement yesterday, sorry, the day before, and he said the words, "You cannot eat democracy." In a wild statement, our president unleashed to basically state, look, we can brag about how democracy is good for the people, but we cannot have it just be lip service. And he said the people cannot eat democracy. Okay, so we actually have to make sure that democracy delivers on the economic gains. Actually, this is the argument that China has often made, that you have to first give people economic progress before you give them democracy. Vernon, what are your views when it comes to conversation about that?
It's funny because then democracy, you are looking at issues of culture, looking at issue of how basically the country is governed, and I think you would want to side with his about it. We need practicality, and this is some of the conversations that I actually come to have with young people around the country with regards to democracy. What is your stance, and are we really living within, and are we actually embracing democracy? Or maybe we want to think about democracy, governance, and leadership only in times where it's probably election times, and you need to pick a leader, and then you realize that actually we live in a country under a democratic system in that nature. With regards to leaders, I don't know if they really do have good intentions, but they really do say nice things. And us having that chance to give them that opportunity to serve and deliver in a democratic state like Zambia, I think it should be a privilege to both Zambians and the leaders being put in power.
So I think where he's trying to come from, that's what I mean, where we're trying to get where China often comes from, it has got to do with the issues of, is democracy an effective way to govern a country? And why I'm saying this is it an effective way to deliver on the gains of economic of a prosperous society? Because you can have a country that can vote for leaders and everything, but the people are starving. Okay, they have no job opportunities, they have no business opportunities, the culture is not working. So what China did is they made a trade-off with their people. They said, look, we're not going to give you we're not going to give you political freedom. You can forget about that. Okay, we're not letting go because we want stability. And here's where sometimes I come down on this. Even Booker T. Washington said to the Black Americans in his book, The Future of the American Negro, he said, I think we made a mistake pursuing political prosperity and political elites too early in our journey, because he said a society requires a citizenry that is economically strong first. So he urged Black people, get out of politics, go into industrial, because he owned an industrial university. He was one of the first Black men in America to do that. Remember, he was born a slave, grew up off the plantations. I mean, a literal slave, not the way us young people like to say, no, I was born, no, this is slavery. It is not slavery. This man was born where people were whipping backs and telling you to actually go into the fields. So he actually said, we need to get away from this, because he said you cannot vote properly if you do not have a good economic base. He said people who can vote well are people who own property, who are good with money, have good character, and are educated. He said when people meet all four of those criteria, you can actually vote. Do you know that the British in Zambia, when they turned it into a protectorate, you know that not every British person could vote, as our central bank governor once said, willy-nilly. Okay, you could not just vote like that. There was actually a criteria for each British person. Even the British people had to adhere to the criteria of you had to have finished school, you had to have finished at least the 12th grade, you had to own property, okay, and you had to be actively employed, and you had to have been in Zambia for 6 months. That's what they said, even to those. So if you were a British person who just came off the boat, no education, no money, you weren't allowed to vote in the elections. And the olden days systems often try to put a criteria on who can vote. And one of the reasons why democracy is now open is because in these developed countries, I'm not against democracy. I'm just trying to explain people. Democracy doesn't function properly when you have absolute poverty. It doesn't function properly. It struggles. And when I say it doesn't function properly, I don't mean you don't have proper elections. I mean your population are easily bribable. Okay, you can give people meal and they'll vote for you. And so they don't vote on policy. The purpose of an election is for the people to select the policy that works the best for the development of the country. We are voting on policy, but we start voting on personality when we are hungry. Okay, that's where the problem comes. So the wealthier your people, the more inclined they are to vote methodically and say policy. And I'll give you an example. When I first came to Zambia, I remember the story. When I first came to Zambia, I remember I was young and bright, and I was this woke liberal socialist who said, and I just finished studying economics. I was like, capitalism is evil. All these wealthy are greedy and evil. Then I started work. Then one day I went to work and I look at my payslip, and 25% is gone from my payslip. I was like, what's this? And then the finance manager says, it's taxes. I'd studied taxes in economics and everything. I never really felt taxes. There's a difference between studying tax and feeling tax. Okay? So once I felt that, I said, okay, what's this for? And he's like, no, to manage the country, all these things. They're the budget. What are the things they mentioned in the budget? And so they take it from me. So I said, why is there a pothole outside my house? And the guy who works for government next to my house is driving a fancy car. This tax thing is rotten. That is the day I handed in my socialism card. And I said, never will I support government taking money from people. Never will you find me doing that. Okay, so...
Do you feel the Zambian people will be okay looking at the aspect of democracy, and at the time like this one, of course, notably, and everyone, of course, would actually agree to the fact that voting is actually stimulated by wrong motives, because people are hungry. What they want is food. You offer them something, they'll take it and vote for you. Do you feel that they'll be open to change from a system of democracy that we have had for the longest time?
I think one of the worst things that we've experienced when it comes to the democratic system is that we haven't worked on economic freedom and economic development. That's the mistake we've made as a people. And this is why I keep saying the first thing we have to focus on. And now I don't think we'd survive well under an autocracy or a single system. I'm not sure. Those in China work because 80% of the Chinese are from one ethnic group. 80% are from one ethnic group. So you've got to be very careful about the ethnic issues you can breed by having no democracy. Because a group of people can say, this tribe are just controlling government for themselves. This is where that's where the distrust can, and we already have that with democracy. Imagine without, okay, where we would be and how we'd be behaving if that was the case. We'd lose ourselves. So I do think we need it. But what I think is that the focus of the people needs to be on economic development and personal economic development. What Booker T. Washington ascribes is that the system will not pick you up. You will pick you up. This is why I urge every person, read 2 books before you start your life journey. The Future of the American Negro and read Up from Slavery. Those 2 books give you the journey of a man who picked himself up from slavery and the ideology that he used to go from a slave to a millionaire, because he was a millionaire back then. Okay, and that's a journey for a person to take in less than 50 years. He took that journey in less than 50 years from a recently freed slave to a millionaire who owned a university, owned property, and was one of the first Black men to go and start dealing with the president in the White House back then when the Ku Klux Klan was running around lynching people. So how does a person, you are a free person, Vernon. You were born free. How does a man born into slavery have a better outlook on life and a better way to move himself up than the rest of us who were born free? Because it's got to do with up here. And he believed in personal development, human development. If you want to round out the books fully, you read Up from Slavery, The Future of the American Negro, Working with the Hands, and Building Character. Those are 4 books he's written that I think every person who comes from either a colonized background or a slavery-based background can use to mentally reprogram themselves and build themselves. Then you will start to see the gains required for democracy to function properly. Once people have their needs met, once they have food, once they have able to provide for themselves, and they recognize that the abilities to provide for themselves and build themselves actually comes from them and not the government, then you can start to see a society that gets a bit better. He did call upon the government to say, please, can you call off the Ku Klux Klan and these people to stop this thing of lynching people, because it deters our progress. It turns people into civil rights activists instead of being economically progressive. So that outlook on life really helped me, and it helped me understand that what needs to be fixed in this country is not the government system. We can continue to panel beat this government system, but as long as you have a citizenry that sits there dependent because they've been programmed, okay? Zambian people were programmed from 1890 up to independence to be dependent on a state. And we just switched from white hands to black hands. Okay, but the mentality and the culture that stays amongst the people has stayed on dependency. So we have to build that wealth building society. So what China did was they said, we as the government have freed you people economically. You cannot vote. Sure, there's no elections. All there is a party system where internally we vote. The civil service in China, 80 million people in the civil service out of the 1 billion adults vote for their civil service, and then their parliament is formed that way. But the Chinese people do not engage in politics. They don't engage in it. What do? They engage in economics. So the Chinese people take all their energy, not at waiting for politicians to deliver on things. They take all their energy at delivering on building businesses, building wealth, doing things, hustling. That's how they operate. So they don't sit there putting their hope and praying that their politicians will do anything. So the question I always ask myself is democracy strong for a growing population? Here's my answer. I think that democracy is needed to maintain peace in Zambia. Okay, otherwise we might be at each other's necks when it comes to this. No, seriously. And it's easy for tribal spats to come out if we're not careful. We got to understand, people, we're an experiment of 72 tribes come together, held together by the grace of God and just by a culture of peace. We shouldn't take this for granted. There are many countries that just have 3 tribes where they're all at each other's throats, ready to cut each other. And here we are peacefully coexisting as 72 tribes. That's an anomaly, okay? Just remember that. And don't take that for granted. So I think democracy helps keep that peace. But for progress, I don't think democracy is what will create progress. Democracy does not create progress. It gives us peace, social cohesion. That's what it does. It gives us an election where we can vote for people and we can not be at each other on that one. But for progress, it is in the hands of the people to start doing that. It's up to us to start doing that and doing that better. So I'll put that there. Now, when it comes to the other story, by the way, setting up for today, Vernon, is that Vice President Harris should be on her way. We did give our words yesterday about all this LGBT hoopla and said maybe, just maybe, it's not the time to start having that conversation.
No, I think it is. We at some point
No, it's not time to start having LGBTs in Zambia.
We had an organization purported to have had runnings around Lusaka at some point, and LGBTQ is like it. We talk about it, it goes quiet. It comes up, it goes quiet. I remember there were even some individuals protesting by himself, dressed almost fully naked. And LGBTQ really, it's a very hot but still critical issue to touch.
No, I said why I say this, Vernon, is we're too poor to have that stuff in our society. Okay, first, people must have food first. I think what the Western world needs to understand is, can we sort out food first? Okay, LGBT is a conversation for people who are economically spoiled. All right, I'm telling you that the issues that the Western countries deal with are because, you know what I believe, Vernon? I think the fact that men are now dressing up and all sorts, I think white countries and the Western countries need to go through 50 years or 100 years of poverty. That's what I think. I think for them to think men deciding what gender they want to be is a priority is because they've got food. That's why. Okay? They've got food in their stomachs. They've got electricity running through their houses. They've got water running through their houses, and they have roofs over their heads and clothes on their back. And because they've got all of these things so cheaply and abundantly produced, they take life for granted. And therefore, it's the biggest issue in the world that Timmy can't pick what. No. The biggest issue in the world is that Banda doesn't have food. That is the biggest issue in the world. Okay? So before you bring that stuff to impoverished countries, can you allow us to sort out food? Okay? That is the priority of this country. And maybe, just maybe people can start to consider listening to you when they're not hungry.
When they're satisfied.
Okay? And the thing is, yes, my issue also is, why do they want to bring these conversations here? Because constantly this is what's following her, and it's the press. They're taking away for the conversation of economic development. Now, my warning to the Western world is, if they want to have any sort of, and I say it again, if you want to have any sort of stance in Zambia economically, and you want to try and make sure you usurp the economic threat that is China from where your mineral basin of EV minerals are found, Zambia and DRC, this is where your basin of copper and cobalt and the essential things for EV battery production are going to be found. Okay, and we've already put our minds to it. If you want to have that ability to have access to those minerals, perhaps don't pick a fight, okay, over something that is trivial to the people there, because China is lurking the other side, willing to take EV minerals. And we've been comfortable doing business with China. And make no mistake, you see, people think, oh, the president is not doing business with China. Then explain to me why the vice president is always meeting with the Chinese. Okay? You see, what we've been seeing in Zambia is, I think they're getting confused. The president is meeting with the Americans. The vice president is meeting with the Chinese. So they've actually created a very good tag team of meeting with both. And the vice president has constantly been meeting with the Chinese and having engagement with the Chinese. And then the president has also stepped up to make sure that he's commissioning things with China, because we are enemies of none and friends to all, to quote President Manu Gwagwa about that. Okay?
But you see, with regards to the aspect of just bringing conversations of LGBTQ in Africa, I feel still that comes back to the aspect of poverty. We have poverty as,
and that's a priority.
Yeah, it's a priority. And so if these guys can come and say, well, we're going to finance and facilitate for this thing to go on, I think that should be a source of concern, because they'll offer us food and someone will take it.
Exactly. You know? And that's what everyone becomes suspicious of. And you see, that's what this is why I say, when President Harris, President Harris, because let's be honest, people, Joe Biden is not running that country. But anyway, President Biden is not running that country. But when Vice President Harris comes here, and maybe they should sit down with their press corps and say, perhaps, if we want to have a future with EVs and we want to make sure that we don't have a disaster with Zambia, perhaps let's not give the Chinese a leg up here. Let's not, because the Chinese don't ask questions about this. So if the moment you start bringing hands of money, we start thinking there are issues, and they have openly said it. And they went on TV recently talking about Uganda's bill. And they went and said they're considering withholding aid from Uganda, which is mainly healthcare aid. What signal do you think you're sending to Zambia? You see, this is the problem when you speak out about things. Because how come they don't say this about the Arab states? The Arab states where they trade oil with. How come? Because there, if you are gay, you get thrown off a building. Okay, that's how they operate. And that's their law. They can sentence you to death instantly. That's how they work. Now, how come they respect that culture, but they won't respect ours? And this is where people start having issues. And so therefore, you start driving trade to who? China. Zambia starts having a stronger economic policy that leads towards China, and you are putting the president in a difficult situation. So the best message I can go out to the US press corps and President Harris's team is put this issue aside. I know that they're here because there's a summit of democracy. Don't come here and start talking about LGBT rights, because you're just going to make it extremely difficult for you to be able to do business with the Zambian people and the African people. And that summit of African leaders that President Biden held in America would have been for nothing if you continue down that road. So that's what the West needs to do. If you want to get your power back, or you want to get your influence back, you have to compete with the Chinese on economic issues, because the Chinese don't ask you. China doesn't believe in bringing its influence here. That's the difference. China does not sell its culture. They don't sell their ways. They don't start demanding you speak Mandarin. They don't do that. They come here, they do business. They'll speak their Mandarin, you speak your Bemba and English, and they'll exchange money with you, and off they go to their home. And Africans are comfortable with that. And what the Western world needs to be very careful is not to try and compete in a way that's uncomfortable with the Africans, especially when China has proven they got more money than you. That's the other thing.
They're very quiet as compared to America, which is way vocal than China, you know.
So what this LGBT issue, the reason we're talking about it this morning is it's affecting trade policy. It's going to affect trade policy, because the president is going to be in a difficult situation where if he's seen to side with these people, then they'll turn around. Well, they'll end up being a turnaround on him. But anyway, we'll leave that issue be. Otherwise, it becomes a very salty issue that we discussed for a long time. Other news that is coming out from the vice president's visit is that there is an alleged hunt, Vernon, for Vice President Kamala Harris's house, the grandfather's home where she grew up in. She did live here for some time. When she was much younger, and Mr. Goplan, because that's from her mother's side, her paternal grandfather, used to live here, and he was here with refugee. He was helping with refugee relocations. So they are looking for him. I have actually laughed saying that house better not be in Kamwala, people. Otherwise, it's a stereotype. Okay, it's going to be a stereotype if that house is in Kamwala. But anyway, but on the other hand of it, we'd also like to say a quick message to our friends at the Times of Zambia. Kamala, okay? Not Kamara. Say it with me, people. Kamala. Hopefully, we'll send Mr. Simon Mwewale in there to help you say it right so that you can write it correctly. Right, let's get into the other parts of the markets today. Deep dive today, Vernon. My deep dive conversation for today is the big news that came out over the weekend. I've waited for a little bit of time to try and get this one out. People have spoken. People have spoken regarding the merger between Access Bank and Atlas Mara. And news came out yesterday that the Bank of Zambia announces the approved acquisition of Africa Banking Corporation Limited by Access Bank, and the subsequent merger of the two banks effective 23 March 2023. This approval reflects Zambia's commitment to financial stability and support banking sector players in meaningful economic growth and development. Members of the public are informed that in the meantime, the two banks will operate as two separate banks until the process of regulatory consolidation and transition is completed. Once concluded, the merged banks will operate as Access Bank Limited. So what does this mean? It appears Access Bank came into Zambia on a buying spree, okay? Because when you think about it, they came in, they bought Kavmont, because that's gone, and that turned into Access Bank. Kavmont was a limping bank. If you kind of looked at their financials the whole time, they barely were cracking a profit. I'm surprised Invest Trust hasn't been purchased. But anyway, that's a different story. But Kavmont was purchased. Kavmont was purchased by Access Bank. So Access Bank has been entering Zambia through acquisitions. They did come here independently, but remember, Access Bank's a Nigerian bank, powerful Nigerian bank, and they have now acquired they acquired Kavmont. Now remember that Atlas Mara is the merger between Bank ABC and Finance Bank. If you remember this correctly, so it took the bank which had one of the widest networks, only second to Zanaco, and that was Finance Bank, and Bank ABC, which had Botswana roots and everything, and was bought by Mara Corporation from the UK. Bob Diamond put that together. Now, these two banks are now forming together. So effectively, you've got this Megatron, or let me say Megazord, if any of you watched the Power Rangers as a kid. You've got this Megazord of a bank, which now comes into four different banks coming together. And four banks, especially Access, which was trying to play in the retail space, and especially Atlas Mara and Finance Bank, which were very strong retail banks. Okay, Atlas Mara and ABC and Finance combined, Atlas Mara has a very strong retail banking sector. Okay, so when you merge these four together, you've now got this Leviathan, or this giant thing that is a merged commercial retail bank, and it really has a strength in retail banking services. Now, my concern for all of this is always got to do with competition. Okay, when you merge these things together, my biggest concern with big banks is that when big, to quote, what's his name? Is it Offset from the Migos?
Offset.
Yes. When he said big bank take little bank, and he did use that terminology. You see, there's economics lessons in some rap music. When you see big bank take little bank, there sometimes is a concern that that becomes a new big bank, and banks tend to favor their richest clients, and they don't offer bottom of the bank services. And the problem we're having in Zambia is that capital does not flow to the bottom. Okay, that is the problem we're facing. Capital does not flow to the bottom, and there's only a select few at the top. Zambia only has 800 to 1,000 millionaires. We have 30 people. That is the size of a private school classroom. 30 people with $10 million or more in net worth. 30. Okay, that's how abysmal our numbers are. Okay, to be a developed country or a good country, at least 1% of your population should be millionaires. At least one. Okay, so that should translate in Zambia to 30,000 households. 30, not 30 people. 30,000 households are the ones that should have that kind of wealth, and we should have, in reality, about that should translate to over 100,000 people. At least we should have as millionaires in this country, but we have less than 1,000 adults who have $1 million or more in net worth, and only 30 people. So when you walk into a public school classroom where you probably find about 70 kids, just know that there are more kids in that classroom than there are people with $10 million or more in this country. Double. Okay, that's how paltry the numbers of wealth are in this country. And that's what we have to be trying to correct. Now, one of the problems is the richer you are, the more capital you can access. So what happens is that when you've got a select few banks, they start to squeeze the capital to go to bigger deals. Banks prefer. So there's some things we need to invest in. There's some changes we need to make as we're allowing these megazord banks to start consolidating so that they can do bigger deals. Because what we're trying to avoid, what we want is when companies like Zambi, for example, want to raise $100 million, we want them to be able to do it at maybe one or two banks instead of having to do it amongst four banks. Okay, we want when a big deal like Zambia Breweries is doing $80 million and they want to do it through the banking sector, want them to be able to do it through one bank as opposed to doing it through multiple banks and have to have syndicated deals. That's been a concern since 2015. So the only thing that we want that we do get concerned about is the bigger banks start to do those bigger deals only. And then when a normal person comes in and says, hey, I'd like to get a mortgage, they're like, yeah, no, we're lending to a mine. Sorry, we'll take your money, but we're lending to a mine. Okay, so that's where the issues start dealing with. So I think on that one main issue, I will say that we must start dealing carefully with that. Now, how do we fix this? In the banking sector, we should fix this, one, by making sure that the Deposit Insurance Bill finally becomes the Deposit Insurance Act. I don't know why that thing has been sitting at the central bank, because not many people know that if your bank goes bankrupt, Kwasila, your money is gone. You know that? like seriously, like there's no deposit insurance for your money. Now, in America and other countries, they actually insure deposits. So we've actually been working on a deposit insurance bill, but it's been sitting there for eons. Okay.
There's actually a bank we mentioned earlier on that I was a holder with. The last 3 times I was there, it seemed like they were becoming even broke.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no longer depositing money there.
And see, if there's a bank run on any bank, now remember that banks only have to keep about 5% of the money. I think it's 9% now. They only have to keep about 9% of your deposit. So if you got 1,000 kwacha sitting in the bank, you know that only about 90 kwacha has to be there. Like physically, 90 kwacha has to be in that bank. So if all of you converge, your money is gone. It's not there. It's been deployed out into loans. It's sitting in bonds. It's gone. Okay. So that bank, if there's a bank run on any single bank, it can cause issues in this country. So that's what deposit insurance is supposed to do. Now, deposit insurance is also useful because smaller banks, or we can now start to have community banks. We can have credit unions or village banks that also subscribe to deposit insurance. Because how many times have we heard a village bank How many times have we heard a village bank went under and whoop, money has disappeared? And you see, that's also, if we, in America, credit unions, which are village banks, are deposit insured. So they actually have deposit insurance for their village banks in America. So if we had deposit insurance, we'd have probably banks that are running better. Village banks that could be running better on better systems. So we actually have a bottom of the banking system. So a deposit insurance bill act would allow for us to spread the banking system so that the individuals get their loans from their local village banks or their community banks, and therefore the big banks are there for wholesale transaction services and big banking sections for the corporations and the government. And that deposit insurance could be worked out from the bank, from the deposit insurance could be worked out mainly from the central bank. That ecosystem would work very well. The other thing we need to invest in is, one of the reasons big banks don't like doing small loans is because they have to sit in credit committee meetings and credit screening, and the same effort that is needed to do a big loan is done for a small loan as well. But you make more money on allocating the same time. So what will they prioritize? Big loans. Okay, and the bigger a bank is, the bigger the loans it does, the richer the clients it serves. So already that's an issue. So what I think we also need to start working on in this country is starting to invest in things like artificial intelligence for credit screening. Okay, we need to start bringing technology to help people be able to fill in information, screen out automatically, so that you can almost do a self-service loan and they don't have to have credit committees do that. If we can start to work out more decentralized finance, more democratized lending, things like peer-to-peer, if we can start to work these things out properly, I'm not talking about the peer-to-peer things like that, all those things that are happening. I'm talking about properly working those things out.
But then how is it that we still have this issue still being tackled as a bill and not an act by now? Because you people in the financial sector should be,
because we like meetings, man. Because we like meetings, but we don't like deliverables. That's why in Zambia we have toxic meeting culture. Okay, people say we have toxic meeting culture in this country. Meetings upon meetings, but no outcomes. Okay, so I think that's something. I know that the central bank won't like that statement, but they've got to explain why that thing is still a bill rather than an act, and why we haven't fixed this issue yet. Okay. It will. So that's one thing that I think would do. Now, I understand where they're coming from with this. I'm just saying that banking consolidation is concerning. Okay, it is concerning because banking consolidation leads to inequality, and we're already battling hard in this country. We're the third most unequal country in the world, not in the country, not in the region. Not in the continent, not in the region, in the world. In the whole 200 nations of the world, Zambia is number 3 when it comes to inequality, and number 1 is South Africa, number 2 is Namibia, and Zambia comes in at number 3. Okay, so and it often is a sign of banking consolidation. Other piece of news that did come out, Vernon, yesterday is default-stricken Zambia has shown that a total public debt of $32 billion. Whew, I don't know, when you owe more money than your GDP, that's those are tough things to battle. But $32 billion, including interest arrears at the end of last year, of which $18.6 billion of our debt is external. 14 billion of it is the local debt sitting in government bonds and so forth. Remember, we have that debt sitting there. And we have external debt of $18.6 billion and arrears that we have not paid on our bonds. So it's a tough battle that we're in as a country. It is a tough battle. However, it being Enterprise Thursday, there is a question here specifically from, I think from one of our viewers here, from hello to everybody. Kunda has said that the house is occupied by the Russian embassy. Could be. Let's see if she goes to visit it. Now, I wonder. Now, if that's true, by the way, I'm not sure, but if that's true, can you imagine how awkward that would be? The US vice president at the time Russia and America are having issues. Can you imagine what that would be like? Whether she'd be able to go and see the house, that would be a serious issue. But there is a question that has been asked here by Rodwell Chitanda, who has asked, are our unit trusts safe in Niger hands? Look, let's just say this for what it is. Access Bank will own a company called ABC Unit Trust or ABC Investments. or which is an asset management company that owns the ABC unit, that manages ABC Unit Trust. It is answerable to the Securities and Exchange Commission. It is monitored continuously. Okay, so there's a difference between a unit trust and a bank. So just remember, there has to be a separation between the two. Obviously, there'll be some options and conversations that will come about with the SEC, but there has to be some separation between the two because that is going to become a serious issue to deal with. Okay, but it is something that everybody should take into consideration. However, you've got to understand that it doesn't mean that Access Bank are some Jerabos, or not Jerabos, what's the word? Yahooze. They're not Yahooze scammers. People relax. They've operated here. They've been okay. So I don't see any risk factors with them. Even in Nigeria, they've got quite a clean bill of health. I'm sure probably we can point out a few things here and there, but they've got a clean bill of health. So I'm not sure, but you will have to take this up with your unit trust manager. Whenever you do see material changes in ownership of that structure, you should bring questions to it, and you should have your unit trust managers. And we are waiting for ABC Investments to make a long statement of what should happen to it. And ABC Investments, remember, ABC Unit Trust is the second biggest unit trust in Zambia. They've got anywhere between 300 to 500 million of assets under management, and they're tailing right behind Mpile. So you've got those two now who are your biggest things. So maybe this is something that we do question. When we saw the transition between Mpile from African Life ownership to Sanlam, we didn't see that as an issue as well. So, by the way, but just check this up. And also, the Securities and Exchange Commission will also have to issue out a statement of this to now give us some guiding notes and also say how they're going to secure people's money to ensure that anything that crosses over between the four. But remember, this is a heavily regulated transaction. One, in terms of the four banks coming together. Two, in terms of the unit trust asset that is owned underneath this new megazord of an institution. But I will tell you this. It now will have access to more. It will be able to use the banking network, okay, and the client network to pull more funds into that unit trust. So remember, that unit trust can now leverage clients of what is effectively four banks now to come and flow into one, and has the ability now to start chasing after its number one position. So you might see that unit trust grow quite fast because now they can use their new parent company to be able to consolidate growth. So that's something that you should consider before we kind of look at it too badly. Now, Vernon, I want to get into our topic of discussion today.
Right.
And our topic of discussion, remember, we've been talking about the learning mindset, the learning mindset and how important that is for entrepreneurship. So today we're going to be talking about the learning mindset in entrepreneurship. And I want to quickly share with you, Vernon, a graph. Now, this is a chart that was created by none other than a handsome gentleman named Munyumba Mutwale to try and help with developing businesses altogether. Yes, Vernon, I am a handsome man. Well, at least my mother says that. I may not be pretty to you, but I am. But my mother thinks I'm handsome. And hey, I've been married before. Someone thought I was handsome. But the point I wanted to really put out here today is that there is a learning curve people should be able to go through. Learning is extremely important. So if a business, whenever you're starting your business, Vernon, you have to recognize that you want to grow your business. So the first thing you want is your business to be able to generate revenue, but eventually you want your business to be able to grow. So that's a very important piece of information. So I want to talk about the growth stages of a business and then to talk about what you should be learning. My advice, by the way, to anybody who's starting a business today is go to something called Y Combinator Startup School. It's an online thing. It's free. I think the problem is because it's free, you won't value it. But it's free. Okay, and it's a way for people to actually learn entrepreneurship from people who have dealt with many startups, especially if you're at the start. Here shows you what I call the 6 stages of business growth. And sometimes a lot of people tend to skip stages. And each of them will determine, I don't know if that's visible to you, Vernon, and to everyone there. And to everyone there, please take a look at it and if it's visible to you. But we developed this as a way for you to be able to see what are the growth stages of a business. 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. And these are basically, 1 is what I call the starting point. This is where you're trying to figure out your business. And the first thing you should be focusing on is solving a simple problem. So what you should be learning is complex problem solving. You should be learning the problem of your customer. What is it? I learned, Vernon, in the firm that we run, is that we saw a problem with people who found capital markets too complicated and found them inaccessible. So we started working on ways to fix that by creating education programs for people and also creating methods of accessibility. And that's what we've been doing in terms of learning how to invest. And we've done that pretty successfully with the bond market. Okay. At that point, don't worry about how beautiful your product looks. Just make it work. Okay, even if it's a basic version 1.0, because you're always going to be improving. And for you to be improving, you just need to keep studying. So there's something in business called the lean startup cycle. So you release something called a minimum viable product. You study it, you learn where the problems are, you add improvements, you build it in. Then you do it again. You just keep doing that. And that's how products improve.
Sorry, to cut you short on that thought. I have had, I'm always intrigued whenever I'm actually moving around town. I see entrepreneurs, street vendors. They seem to go for whatever product there is. And sometimes I wonder.
That's self-employment, Vernon. That's not entrepreneurship.
My concern is, how do you then reach out to such kind of people? Because I feel they go buy the wrong things. They go get into the wrong business sometimes. I don't know what kind of advice or whatever information they get that this thing might sell, but some of the products they buy to resell, they just seem out of season. They're just out of line sometimes. How do you work around with such kind of people?
Well, this message, Vernon, I'm going to be very honest, it's not palatable to everyone.
Yeah.
And it's not to say anything about the street vending community. What I'm trying to say is it's a cultural issue. Cultural change happens small. So those who are enthusiastic about building startups, not building self-employment, they will hear this message. Then they'll become the example for the next phase, and that growth will become the example for the next phase. So unfortunately, Vernon, the only thing I can tell you is that we have to take this step by step. So whenever you're looking at this model, the first thing you want to do is focus on a problem. The first step is called problem solution fit. Okay? Find a problem that is viable in the world. And you'll actually be able to look at it. But I think just for a moment, I think we'll just have to cut for a quick ad and then come back just to quickly finish this. And then we'll return to how you learn your way through this growth model. So to all, just quickly, bear with us as we pay a few bills. And on the other side, we shall be able to come back.
For Behind the Markets, of course, this morning. Thank you so much for those who are still with us today, online and pretty much live on the frequency 93.7 FM. Mutuala, you were alluding on to something.
So I was talking about in your early stages of building your business, you're just trying to learn your problem. Okay. So what do you need to be learning? What books do you need to be around? What cultures do you need to be learning? So I'm in a point where I'm trying to build a startup. Okay, I'm now at the point where I've solved the problem and I'm trying to build a startup. And what I've recognized is I need to read books about startups who changed culture, who disrupted. I need to read about disruption, how it works. I need to read about, I need to study markets that have done this. My learning is going to be geared towards where I am. One of the reasons I've seen, a lot of people say people learn a lot of things, but it never pays any dividends. And I'll tell you what the problem is. We learn things that are out of season. Okay, you're learning about developed businesses and corporate strategies, but you're a startup. Okay, so go and learn about startups and how startups are doing. Take startup school, understand startup ideology, understand startup processes, but just study your problem. Okay, so at this point, you want to focus your learning on your problem. You need to comply with your legal structure. You need to learn how to sell. Okay, because the first thing you have no business if you're not selling something. Okay? Because if anything, there are three things you do in a business of value. You solve a problem, sell a product, and serve a person. Those are the three things that you do. That's it. And you focus on being good at those three things: solving your problem, selling a product, and serving a person. And if you can do that in that area, and the purpose is to create a cash flow, not to find cash, but to create a cash flow. Okay? Cash flow means regular income coming in the form of cash. All right? Not a pile of cash through a deal. A lot of people, we like to look for a big deal, and that's it. Life is not about any big deal. It's about making sure you find cash flow. It's about getting sure you don't find a cow to slaughter it. If you find one cow, you slaughter it and you eat it, you are hungry tomorrow. But if you find a cow and you milk it, you are fed for multiple times. So you need to create a milk producing cow. Okay, that is what you're trying to create with your business. And
with regards to the aspect of education, what you just from talking about, how would you? I mean, you said you need to learn how to not all these big corporate with something that is unrelated before a startup. But with regards to education, would you want to, I don't know, synchronize it with philosophy, for example? Philosophy suggests that we tend to learn about the obvious and not something that we do not know. Would you want to say maybe we should take time and learn about a business aspects of a business you are trying to venture into, but you do not know or understand, just to help you shape and improve your business at the end of the day?
What I would advise, here's a book I would advise to as many people. I've gone through it and it's on my reading list this year. It's been recommended to me and I've gone through. What I do with books is I go through summaries first. I would say go and read a book called Creators Code, The 6 Essential Skills of Successful Founders. Okay, because you're founding something, you're starting something, and it will talk to you about what characteristics these people have, and perhaps maybe work on implementing those in the education system. Because if we build the characteristics of people who are good startup or who are good entrepreneurs, then all of a sudden that culture will formulate into people then doing it. Character turns into culture, and then that turns into action. So I think what we need to build in this country is a startup culture and start to look at what it is. Complex problem solving in school is something I would encourage. I would encourage complex problem solving as a subject in secondary school. I would encourage not just the word entrepreneurship, but to also address things, certain things like how to manage money, certain things like how to sell. I would put sales in school if I want to start bringing people that skill. Because if you can solve problems and sell, then you've got a business on your hands. As long as you can spot a problem after that. That's the only thing, how to spot problems in society and see it as opportunities, not as a complaint to your honorable politician. Okay, so what I'm saying is at the bottom of this pyramid lies already the fact that we should be studying those things. The next stage you should be talking about, Vernon, and I'll be going through these very quickly, is how to optimize your business for efficiency. So at each stage, you may need to unlearn some of the things you've learned and learn new things, okay, because you have to keep learning. So operational efficiency is what you're looking for. You're then looking to establish something called product market fit. In other words, how do I get my market and my product to fit? So you start by creating a solution to a problem. Then you create a team of people around that solution so that you can do it. That's called team vision fit. Now you have to get into what's called product market fit. So you're now creating a business model on top of that with operational efficiency, and your focus is now on the logistics. How do I deliver this service? I've solved the problem. Now, how do I deliver it? I've created a cash flow. Now, how do I deliver it efficiently? So you've made it functional. Now you're making it operational. Now you're making it sustainable. You're making it optimal. Now you have to work on sustainability. This is now when you're forming a business. At the first point, you're self-employed. You shouldn't even be hiring at this point. Okay. Now at the next level, at this point, you're now employing people and managing them. At this point, now you're trying to grow your revenue. You should be very careful about trying to grow a business you haven't finished solving the problem to. So solve that problem properly, then expand the business by now selling to new client bases. Try and now be fully profitable now. Create sustainability in your business. Eventually, once you're sustainable and profitable, that's when you start diversifying or maybe working on absolutely differentiating yourself from people. You're trying to now form very good relationships with suppliers, handling your order flow properly, and create. At this point, now you're focusing on tactics and strategy because people like to write 5-year business plans. For what? For who? You haven't even started a business. Start it first before you write a 5-year business plan. Then at this point, when you're now thinking tactical and strategy, so now you start studying where the strategists are. You read according to this, you study according to this, and then you start building yourself up. Now, when you're a differentiated business with good relationships, a strong business model, growing revenue, now you start building a full-fledged brand, and that's where you start talking about what impact. Asking people, you start a business from day one, you want to start being socially impactful. For what? You haven't sustained that money yet. So start being socially impactful when you created a business that has growth and profitability. Then, and you can be socially impactful with your product, okay? I actually advise people to make sure your product is socially impactful, because the customers of today want social impact in the product. But when you want to be socially impactful with your profits, okay, that's when you can start doing that now when you have developed a profitability, because you're sharing poverty if you're not profitable, okay? And then finally, at the end, you're then building a business legacy. Who's going to continue? Who's your number two? Who are the structures? What culture have you created in your organization? Because a culture establishes a point of continuity. That's why no matter how young politicians are, they're as corrupt as the older ones, because that's a culture that they've built. Okay, that's the serious situation. So if you want to do that, you're developing, and at this point, when you're developing a brand and you're developing a culture and you're developing a legacy, you're now an entrepreneur, because you're creating something that can run without you there. And you're creating this asset that you can even float in public, and then you can let this thing run on its own. But at each stage, there is learning. So I'm going to share one final thought with you, Vernon, which I got from the founder of FUBU, which is Mr. Daymond John. And so I know we've run into so much overtime today. Apologies to everyone. But this is me talking about observation here. But I'm going to give you a quote from the founder of FUBU, who is Mr. Daymond John, and he is a man from Shark Tank. And he said a very simple quote, which as many of you would probably be interested to see, that everybody should know. He says, as an entrepreneur, you never stop learning. The day you stop learning is the day you stop growing. I added that part in at the end. So if you want to, you have to first figure out, where am I? What do I need to learn for the next stage I'm going to? What do I need to learn to be the best at where I am? What do I need to learn for the next stage? Be careful of learning things that are 6 levels above. You become very knowledgeable, but you don't become wise because you're not able to implement it. If you're a startup, learn startup culture. If you're a growing business, learn growth strategies. If you're a brand, if you're now established, learn brand building and community building, but learn along your road. Do not be a grade 1 trying to learn grade 12 mathematics. That's what a lot of us do in business, and we find that it's not applicable. I had to start sorting that out and looking at what was useful to me, and let me learn that so that I can apply it, because application is what cements knowledge. And that, Vernon, is the end of today. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about the future of learning. Where's that going?
I must have made of thoughts tomorrow, what the future looks like. Thank you so much for having tuned into Behind the Markets today. We were looking at just interesting aspects. In case you missed it, feel free to actually catch up on our social media platforms, like Twitter, Facebook, as well as Instagram. Mr. Mtwale, pleasure always to be with you.
Thank you very much, Vernon, and have a wonderful and blessed day.